Okay, so I'd like to pay my debt to society and to this wonderful group of people faithfully following the Torah ideas of the parsha. In this group, by going back to last week's parsha, wherein the Moabite king, whose name is Balak, wants to defeat the Jewish people as they pass through the desert. He decides rather enlightenedly that he wants to use Jewish weapons against Jews, not spears and physical weapons, but rather ideas and words, which is the true strength of the Jew. And hence he finds a counterpart to Moshe, or one he imagines is a counterpart to Moshe, the pagan prophet Bilam. And as we know, when Bilam eventually is meant to recite his curses, God puts blessings in his mouth instead. So these blessings are very, very beautiful ones, very profound, and they also speak about what will happen ba'acharit hayamim, the end of days. And hence we have in the Torah itself a reference to this very powerful idea of the Messiah, the Moshiach in Hebrew, which in the sense that we experience it now, after the temple had already been built in Jerusalem and destroyed, and we've been exiled, it's looked in a much different light. At that time, the expectation was to go into Israel, not to be defeated, to build a temple and to stay there. Nonetheless, we do find inklings, we do find illusions and hints in the Torah that in fact the presence of Israel, the people of Israel in the land of Israel, may not at first be permanent. There may be exile. And ultimately, however, the final redemption has to occur in which a Jewish king brings the people back into the land and they stay there in peace and prosperity. After David becomes king, then to the prophets at that time, and David Melech himself, King David, is promised that from him onwards, the monarchy in Israel will always be descendants of David. And that's a accepted fact in terms of biblical history. And the descendant of David that we wait now is Jews. When we say, Ani ma'amin be'emunah shalema, I believe with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah, well, that's Mashiach. What we want, this exile to end, to return to Israel, to not have enemies, to not have persecution, to be able to serve God through the fulfillment of His commandments, by studying and by praying. This is what we look forward to, and this is what we pray for many times a day in our liturgy. And indeed, reference is made to this time period in the blessings of Bilam itself in a few different places, depending on the commentaries. Outlook, the language is very poetic, so there is some room for a variety of interpretations, but everyone agrees that Bilam prophesies about the eventual final redemption of the Jewish people. And Maimonides specifically explains the couplets in the blessings of Bilam as alternating references to two messianic figures, one traditionally referred to in Jewish theology as Mashiach ben Yosef, the Messiah who's descendant of Yosef, who will not bring the final redemption, but will prepare the world for redemption. And then ultimately, Mashiach ben David, the Messiah, will be the descendant of David. And one of the verses which is interpreted as referring to the arrival of the Messiah is Dorach Kochav B'Yakov, a star shall go forth from Jacob. And this star is explained by many commentaries as being a reference to the Messiah, but not all. Whereas the other commentaries acknowledge that in general, the blessings do make reference to the Messiah. However, the specific verse of Dorach Kochav B'Yakov, this very famous and oft-quoted verse of there shall go forth a star from Jacob, refers not to the Messiah, but to Jacob in the classic sense, to every single Jew, that our star will shine. Each one of us will reach our full potential. And so we have this two forms of interpreting the verse, which bring us to a very inspiring Hasidic interpretation. As the Rebbe of Lubavitch explains very often, that when we have two explanations of a single verse in the Torah, they may be distinct from each other, but Torah is ultimately a Torah of harmony and integrity, and hence we can always find a connection between them. And so too with these two explanations of the star from Jacob, according to some opinions referring to the king, the Messiah, the Mashiach ben David, the eventual redeemer of the Jewish people. Others saying it refers to every single Jew. And the Rebbe explains very beautifully that in fact we have each one of us inside of us a spark of the Messiah, the highest level of the soul, which is called Yechidah Shebenefesh, the uniqueness of the soul, the unity of the soul, which is higher than the transcendent level of the soul, very, very deep. In a sense, Israel is referred to as a Komah Shlema, kind of like one person. And there's many, many examples of this brought in many different writings. And so the unification of all of our sparks together really constitute the persona of Mashiach himself. And that's why Mashiach in the Kabbalah is described as a neshama klalit, a soul which is a general soul, a collective soul, which has within it all the other souls of the people. So the Mashiach is nothing if not a unifying, powerful force bringing together the entire nation, implying, of course, that each individual also has within himself part of this great fire, has this spark. And so we know that it will be the contribution of each individual that will also reveal this redeeming figure, will bring about this redemption. And so each individual has to, on the one hand, carry his weight and add to the light in the world, add his part in transforming the world within his small area or larger area of influence. Although we know, as explained in previous lectures, that the result, the transformation that takes place with God's assistance will be far greater than our efforts, but our efforts are a necessary precondition. And hence we have this idea of each one of us having within us kind of a small Messiah, each one of us being in a small way part of that. How does this happen? How do we do this? So if you look at the word for redemption, which means the redemptive state, the ultimate time when evil will be obliterated, when there will be prosperity, there will be only good health indeed, and eventually death itself will be eradicated, as difficult as it is to understand, that is called the Geula. The Geula means the redemption, and it refers to the state where everything is the way it should be. The system is not hacked, as one modern writer puts it. Now the system is hacked. Eventually that will become unhacked. That is the Messianic era. That is called Geula. It consists of several Hebrew letters. Gimel, Aleph, Vav, Lamed, and Hey. 5 letters. Now the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is trapped, is in exile, so to speak. And that means that things are not in their proper place. Spirituality does not seem to be the primary motivating force in people's lives. There's lots of bad things that happen. Evil people succeed. Righteous people suffer. Things are not the way they should be. This is called the exile. In Hebrew, this is called goleh. 4 letters. Gimel, Vav, Lamed, Hey. And strangely, if we look at the word for exile and the word for redemption, there's only one letter different. It is the Aleph. Geula has an extra Aleph. So first of all, we see that goleh, exile, Judaism does not look at exile as a self-standing concept of something, some kind of, as we always say with the Shema Yisrael, this is not a duality where there's competing concepts, there's only one God. And the inner aspect of the golah, of the exile, as with everything, is ein od milvadu, there's nothing but God himself. And so deep within the exile, although we should and we must look at it as being something negative in a manifest sense, but ultimately deep within that, there's a purpose. And when we reveal this purpose, the exile, the illusion of the exile becomes unmasked, and we transform that part of the world. How do we do that? How do we show that exile is really nothing but a godly world where the godliness is concealed? We transform goleh, exile, into geula by each one of us adding an aleph. What is aleph? Aleph means the chief. God is referred to as alufo shel olam, the chief of the world. And our job is wherever we go, wherever there is darkness, wherever there is concealment in every aspect of our lives, aspects that do not appear to be on the face of it sanctified, our business, again, our everyday life, we inject the aleph into the goleh. A person who sees food, I'm going to satisfy my appetite. That's exile, that's darkness. He looks at eating as an end to itself. When he looks at eating as a way of getting energy to serve God, and he expresses that by saying a bracha beforehand, by making sure that the food is kosher, what he has done is he has taken goleh, he's taken the exile, and he has injected into it the aleph. And with this, he transforms in that one aspect of existence, goleh, exile, into geula. When this process is completed, the whole world becomes transformed. And at that point, the advent of the Messianic era and the arrival of the Mashiach and everything that entails is something which is automatic. And that is something we all can and must do.